when times are tough, whether tough times are just because of illness or injury, job loss kind of thing, or there's some big event, fires in California, for instance. If we go into that in a depleted state, our mind or our body, our emotional state is not, if we're not strong, it's going to be really, really hard to make our way through that. So
Right.
what you're talking about, which is protect yourself, focus on your health, keep yourself emotionally and mentally strong. It's critical just to be successful in today's world, but it is so incredibly important to make it through the difficulties. I remember I was a kid and we had run out of food and my mom was gone and my little sister, she's, I don't know, 6 years younger than me. She's, I don't know, actually that's not true. She's 10 years younger than me now that I do the math.
All right.
And she's little and she's like 5 or 6. And she comes in and she says, Nate, what are we going to eat? And I was working at Pizza Hut. I'm making $3 an hour. I am big money. And I said, well, just make something, and I had eaten a little personal pan pizza that day. I was fine. And she's like, well, there's nothing to eat. And I said, oh, come on. Now I think my little sister is, being emotional. She's dumb, whatever, what big brothers always think about little sisters. And so I start looking in the pantry, in the kitchen. There's nothing. I opened every cabinet. There's nothing. And I said, well, let's go down to the food storage room. There's something down there. Because we had this place where we had shelves and any excess stuff would go in there. My mom, grew a garden. We were poor. We grew garden. We canned stuff. We packaged. We saved. We did everything. All there was a bottle, glass bottle, like a mason jar of peaches. And the seal had never formed. So it was all on top. It was useless. I don't know why my mom hadn't thrown it out. I didn't know it was there. But that was the only thing that was left in the food storage room. We had zero food in the house.
Wow.
And I'll never forget the fear. So the good story is my mom came home with food from Augustin Farms. It was charitable food. It came to our house that day. I was getting ready to go find a way to poach a deer, find something. I was going to go do something. I didn't have any money. I had like $7, but I could go poach something. I could go fish. I was going to go do something. I was going to try. But the fear, that feeling has never left me. And the reality is, I was actually in a pretty decent mental state. And when it happened, it was paralyzing for a few seconds before I realized I'm going to go take matters into my own hands. I was literally thinking my best bet wasn't to go ask for help from a neighbor, was to go commit a felony. It's crazy. Right. But that's where my head was. And a few minutes later, my mom comes in. She's like, Nate, got a bunch of food in the trunk. Go get it. And I carried it all in, and I was so grateful for it. And emotionally, when we took that food and we had a warm meal about 45 minutes later, the comfort, the release, the peace that came into my life has never left me. And so when times are tough, you're on the side of a mountain, you're bad weather, whatever, and you can have a good warm meal. You've got water, you've got some power solutions that'll get you through. It brings a level of peace, just takes away the fear. And your children and your parents will never forget that warm meal when times were really tough.
Yeah, that's such a powerful story. I don't know how many people in the U.S. experience a situation like that. It's less than I think we would expect. But that's incredible that you went through that. We were pretty poor too, 5 kids. My dad was the sole breadwinner in the house, and we also had quite a bit of food pantry food in my growing up days. For our church, we had a food pantry that we would go to and bring it back for all the people in the city. And we ended up taking a, nice chunk of that food home too, because we couldn't afford to buy it. But, it's a very, very interesting. And it's so cool just to see, where you're at today, where I'm at today. And, we can criticize a lot of things about America, but we have the ability to do this, to get from where we were back in those days to where we are today. So I think that's huge.
You
Um,
know, I have to add something on there. I think about my personal journey, which you've shared a little bit about, or I've shared a little bit about. When I think about it from beginning to end, from super poor, high school dropout, college, University of Chicago, president of a company, as I think through that level of success, and I think about my siblings, chief legal person in a company, CEOs, I'm a president, CFOs, chief people officers, my siblings, super successful. I am convinced that there is more that is great about America than is broken about America. We just don't hear all those stories all the time. The media forgets to tell us that there's a
right,
lot of good in this world. And there's a
right,
lot of, I ask people all over the country. Um, I probably took 50 flights, 75 flights, round trips somewhere last year. I was all over California, a lot of places, all over through the Southeast, talking about emergency preparedness. And my personality is such, there's not a lot of strangers. So if they want to talk, I'll talk. And, I'm in Lafayette, Louisiana, and this person is telling me the story of when they didn't have food. I'm in Denver. I'm in Charleston. I'm in all these various places. Physically, they're talking to Uber drivers and hostesses and waitresses, whatever, right?
yep,
Everybody that I talk to, everybody that's a kind of a normal person has experienced food scarcity. They
really,
have their story. Now, there's a lot of people who grew up, super middle class, and they don't have that story.
yeah,
But I was talking to a guy, and he's in a business suit. He looks fantastic. I'm in boots and jeans, and I'm just a regular old guy. And we're both standing in line waiting to check into a hotel in Norfolk, I think is where it was. Anyway, it was over there on the East Coast. Um, and he's like, what is it? 'Cause I had a big bag full of food samples that I was going to use on a display, food like this that I was going to use for the TV display. And so we get to talking about that. And he's a Annapolis grad. So he went to the Naval Academy. He is super successful. And we got to talking. I said, one of the things that I miss, I said, we were so hungry and so poor so often that the USDA cheese that we would go pick up when it was available, like every month or so, I said, that was good cheese. I said, I really miss that cheese. And we got emotional because he had grown up, he's a man of color, has a lot more melanin in his skin than I do. And he grew up living on that same cheese. And it brought back to him this memory of safety, that they always knew they could get the cheese. If nothing else, they could have grilled cheese sandwiches kind of thing.
yeah,
And it was just such a real moment because he looked, he was probably standing there in a $5,000 suit and we were checking into a nice hotel. I'm telling you, he had gone through it too. Because when I mentioned the cheese, which I still think is one of the great things I've ever experienced from a charitable food standpoint, that the cheese was so welcome because we didn't get a lot of dairy. Anyway, it was just neat. So there's a lot of people who have not experienced it, but there's a lot of people, millions and millions by my experience, who have. Maybe not as bad as I have. Maybe didn't go collect free food and deliver it into the city like you did, but they experienced it a little.
right.